after the Muhajirin and the Ansar. Say, our Lord, forgive us and our brethren who have preceded us in faith, and put not in our hearts any hatred against those who have believed. Our Lord, you are indeed full of kindness, most merciful. So this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the Muhajirin, He mentioned qualities. First of all, they're Muhajirin, they sacrifice. This is by itself is a great quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them from the Muhajirin. That means they left their homes, they left their wealth, they left what they love so much for the sake of Allah, and they left with nothing whatsoever. Such a high level of sacrifice. So this by itself is a great quality. That's why it says, الَّذِينَ أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ وَأَمْوَالِهِمْ يَبْتَغُونَ فَضْلًا مِنَ اللَّهِ وَرِضْوَانًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised their hearts. They're sincere. They seek the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. They seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَنْصُرُونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. And they give victory to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That means they're upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. This is their focus. This is their concern. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. They are the truthful ones. Nothing for them, because they migrated, they left everything for what? For the sake of Allah. Their life is for the deen of Allah. And that's why they have the highest level whatsoever. And they seek the rewards from Allah and the pleasure of Allah. And people seek happiness. The believers, they seek the pleasure of Allah. Even if a person, from the subject of al-ata, when you're given something from Allah, people seek to be happy, right? Happiness, it happens and it goes away in this life. So it's not really something that you would want to have, and that's your only thing that you want to have. But rather, what needs for a person to want to have is ar-rida, to be pleased. And this is much higher and better than happiness, as far as the word happiness is concerned, because this is a continuous happiness. To be pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be pleased with the qadar of Allah, pleased with the deen of Allah, always pleased. So, but happiness is like you one day like this, one day another, and it's going to still happen, but this is not ليس المعول علي. This is not what your heart is upon, and that's what concerns you, but rather الرضا. And that's why when they sought the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them pleased. The Ansar, the people of Al-Madinah, والذين تبوأوا الدار والإيمان من قبلهم يحبون من هاجر إليهم. They love those who migrated to them. ولا يجدون في صدورهم حاجة مما أوتوا. And they don't have anything in their hearts with regards to the ithar to their brothers from Al-Muhajirin. They sacrificed also their own sacrifice, in which they gave whatever it takes for them to establish this brotherhood between the Muhajirin and the Ansar. And the examples of that are great from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. And they make ithar even if it's against themselves, even if they have hardship and difficulty. وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And whoever shield himself from the greed within his own self, this is the successful one. So this is a battle that has to be fought. And that is to combat the greed within our own selves. And this is the means and the path of success, is when someone is shielded against the greed with his own self. So this is the Muhajirin and the Ansar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised them in such a way. It's amazing that after that, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned those who came after them, and this is till the day of judgment, there's no characteristics mentioned. It's dua. They make dua. That means what? As the ulama, they say that the characteristics mentioned before, this is upon those who come after them. So the qualities that those who come after the Muhajirin and the Ansar, they have to have these qualities that are mentioned about the Muhajirin and the Ansar. Whether it's going to be the same aspect of hijrah and nusra and things like this, people migrated, people are in need and people are fulfilling their needs, whether it's like this or it doesn't have to be that way, this is always the believers are upon these great qualities. They sacrifice for the sake of Allah, they seek the rewards of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, they seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, they make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior, they establish the deen of Allah, they are upon sidq and truthfulness, they love those who might be in need of them, not those who that are in need are in love with those who are generous with them. It's the opposite. They love when someone is in need of them, And they don't have any grudges, anything in their hearts, and they make ithar. So these are the qualities that is mandatory upon those who come after them. And to follow them with ihsan, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in the other verse, والسابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them, and they're pleased with him. Those, the third category, those who followed them with al-ihsan. So that's the wisdom behind no characteristic is mentioned here with those who come after them. But what is mentioned is that they make dua. And this is one of the means to establish the brotherhood and the purification of the heart to save oneself. Why the need of brotherhood for the sake of Allah is to save oneself first, because this is your deen. This is what we're going to be asked about in the Day of Judgment. This is as the salah and as the zakah and as this and that. Part of that is to have this towards one another, especially, and it becomes more and more when it comes to the da'wah for the sake of Allah, or people upon matters of deen, like in the masjid and in doing da'wah for the sake of Allah. This is even more as an obligation upon them. So what do they say? وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا. They say, our Lord, forgive us. They start with themselves first, which is always the etiquette of dua, that you start with yourself first. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا, and to our brothers, الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَ بِالْإِيمَانِ, those who surpassed us with al-Iman, the generations before, starting from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or even before that. And that's why, as it's clearly stated, that the Rafidah, those who hate the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, there's no share for them for al-fay or the booty of the war, as these are the categories of those who would receive the booty of the war, as the surah also states this meaning. Because they detach themselves from this ummah once they start cursing the first generation, the best generation, which is the generation of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purified this ummah from those who would have these evil things, detach them from the ummah. There's no need of them. There are no need of them whatsoever. And this is, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said that this is something that will show from the later generations. As the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لا تذهب هذه الأمة حتى يلعن آخرها أولها. That this ummah would not end till the last would curse the first. So that means this is detaching themselves from the ummah. Why? Because those who come after the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they say ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, أمروا أن يستغفروا لهم فسبوهم. They were commanded to make dua that Allah forgive them, but instead they reviled them, or they said bad things about them. And then she recited the ayah, وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And do not have any ghil, any grudges, any hatred in our hearts towards the believers. So part of that is to those who came before us, and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and the Tabi'een, and so on, and those who are present, all the believers, not to have any ghil or any hatred to any of the believers. And as Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, وهذا دعاء شامل لجميع المؤمنين السابقين من الصحابة ومن قبلهم ومن بعدهم. This is a very comprehensive dua to all of the believers, those who before us, from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and who before them and who after them. وهذا من فضائل الإيمان. This is from the virtue of al-Iman. أن المؤمنين ينتفع بعضهم ببعض. That the believers, they benefit from one another. The believers, they benefit from one another. ويدعو بعضهم لبعض. And they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for one another. Why? بسبب المشاركة في الإيمان. Just for the fact that they have the common thing between them, which is al-Iman. Al-Iman brought them together. So this by itself what necessitates the dua for one another. So this is part of the deen. This is one of the means that a person to eliminate what might be in the hearts of unease or things towards one another, is to sincerely make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them. So make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not for those who you like or you're inclined to, or they share some qualities with you or so. You make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even for your enemies. And there's this confusion that people might have because of the lack of knowledge or whatever reasons and diseases in the heart. Even the ones that you, for example, for the sake of saving the deen, you warn against them and you protect the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the fact that you show the deen of al-haq, and this is wrong and this is wrong, and don't listen to these deviants, those who would take you away from the truth and so on. But your heart, you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them. What's wrong with that? You don't have to make dua against them. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah guide them, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them steadfast, and it's sincere, and you wish all good for them. These things has physical effect. But it's very easy to claim that a person is upon what is right, and then to try to be superior over others, and with the diseases of the heart that are not being cured. And this is one of the diseases that we have and we face, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from this. So the whole package has to be clear, as if it's correct to say that. So a person is upon the deen of Allah, upon the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The same thing is our hearts upon the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and the best of all hearts is the heart of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is part of the believers, that they make dua for one another, and they benefit one another. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلِهَذَا ذَكَرَ اللَّهُ فِي الدُّعَاء نَفْيُ الْغِلِّ عَنَ الْقَلْبِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the dua to eliminate al-ghil, the ghil or the grudges or any small or major ghil. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا. غِلًّا nakira. That means big or small, any grudge, any unease feeling towards one another, anything whatsoever, to remove it. The al-qalil wal-kathir, the small and the major, everything. And because if it's removed, what happens? The opposite will be in place. So some things that if you remove it, it doesn't stay empty. No, if it's removed, it will be replaced by the opposite, which is the love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As he says, الَّذِي إِذَا انْتَفَى ثَبَتَ ضِدُّ. If it's removed from the heart, the opposite will be established. What's the opposite? وهو المحبة بين المؤمنين والموالاة والنصح. The love among the believers, الموالاة, to help one another, to support one another, and النصح, to have the concern towards one another, and to give the nasiha and to advise for the sake of Allah, for their own goodness, not for oneself goodness, but for their own goodness. If they do something or they fall into shortcomings, and from the other side to accept that and to love that someone is correcting them, and not to be enemies to another, and whether it's, again, in general relationships or matters of deen. And it's the more we see how deficient we are, and then we see why what happens. Imagine at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people as an army facing their enemies, and imagine if the hearts are against one another. The means for their success, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aided them, is that they would even sacrifice their life for their brothers. So all of these silly things that comes into the heart, this was something easy for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for them, and they worked on themselves when they had their heart attached to the hereafter and seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So سبقونا بالإيمان, surpassed us in al-iman, is an evidence that they are together in matters of al-iman, which means they followed the aqidah of the Sahaba. Right? ربنا اغفر لنا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَ بِالْإِيمَانِ. So the iman of the Sahaba, the belief of the Sahaba, we need to follow that. You're making this dua. Are you sincerely asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have the same belief as the belief of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, or just some general terms in this? And that's what he says here. وَأَنَّهُمْ تَابِعُونَ لِلصَّحَابَةِ في عقائد الإيمان, in the matters of aqidah of al-iman and its usul, foundation. وهم أهل السنة والجماعة الذين لا يصدق هذا الوصف التام إلا عليهم. You cannot have a sincere and a true characteristics to the people of Ahl Sunnah on anyone else, because this is truly what they follow, the belief of the Sahaba رضي الله عنهم. ووصفهم بالإقرار بالذنوب والاستغفار منها واستغفار بعضهم لبعض. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أو وصفهم, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them, that they acknowledge their sins and they seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from these sins, and they seek forgiveness towards one another, and ijtihadihim, and their struggle في إزالة الغل, to remove the غل, the hatred and the grudges and the حقد and the enmity in the hearts towards their brothers that are believers. Because the dua means that this is what they want to be. It was not just lip service. They say it, they mean it, and they take the means to it, and this is how their characteristics is. And that one would love for his brother what he loved for himself, and things like this. So these are the three categories of the ummah. And that's why to remove the ghil or at-tabaghud or the hatred in the hearts of everyone, as we heard in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and the aqwal and the statements of the early generations of Islam, and the different parts of our bodies that are supposed to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, we have to be aware of this. And when it all goes together, when it comes to even last night when we were talking about disciplining oneself, we have to discipline ourselves when it comes to also matters of relationships. And this nafs, as we will talk about this example later inshallah tonight, but I'm not sure, the Imam al-Ajuri rahimahullah, he mentioned an example, and he said, inshallah we'll read it if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability. He said about that example, you have to really give it your thought and benefit from it. What is it? It's about the pony. When you break the pony to be able to ride over it and things like this, you have to break it. They call it break the pony, which is the training that the pony has to go through, because the horse is a wild animal. It's not something that once it's born, you ride, you jump on it, you put the kids on it. No, it takes months, right, for training to break it into the fact that it's able to be, even you ride on it. And it requires expertise and patience. Not anyone. You cannot just read instructions and do it. And it takes months. And he talked in some details of this, and how that the nafs is similar to this. Our self is like this. You have to know yourself. That's even one of the first thing that you would do for something like that, is that you have to first build that confidence and the relationship with that pony. You have to touch it and pet it and things like this, so that he's acquainted with you. He's not having fear from you. And that takes some time till he gets to know its owner, and then you take one step after the other. And so this is the same thing with the nafs. And that's why it's from both ends. When it comes to these types of qualities, don't expect that it's going to be overnight. So you have to be patient with yourself. With these qualities that are non-physical qualities. You can say, make sujood now, you make sujood now. No problem. Physically, no problem making sujood. But to work on oneself and one being and one soul and one's heart, that requires patience. And you have to deal with yourself like this pony that needs to be trained. With ilm, with knowledge. And that is required in relationships and dealing with one another. So when a person sees himself like he's as if he's a wild animal, and all of a sudden he's in the midst of everyone, either he will treat them and they treat them with ignorance, or they have to be patient with one another. And that experience in dealing with one another is part of that breaking into oneself, to wean oneself. So that's why it requires for the person to be patient with himself and to keep on working and seeking forgiveness from Allah, knowing, having the ilm first, what is required from me, then to al-hilm wal-ana, forbearance, forgiving, pardoning, having the sincerity towards others. You find that you have grudges against someone, then it's dua, oh Allah, remove this from my heart. And then even taking physical means, giving gift, smiling, whatever there is, removing all the means of hatred. And then from the other side, to understand that I have an issue and my brothers have issues. So that means they have to be patient with one another. So if I would expect, if I say something or if I do something that is against what I'm working on myself, then I expect that brothers would be patient with me, because how the pony is, the trainer is patient with it if it does something that is not appropriate, because you are still in the training process. And this is how things are. And that's why you would find amazing, and inshallah, hopefully you get some of the statements of the early generations of Islam. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, one of which, if I'm correct, and correct me if I quote it wrong, إن من شر الناس. One of the meanings of the hadith, one of the most evil people, من إذا أحسن من تحسن إليه اتقاء شره. It's something like close to these words. From the worst of the people is the one that you're kind to him so that you shield yourself from his evil. You want to protect yourself from that evil characteristics of that person, so you're being kind to him. This person is one of the most evil people. Why? Because with your brothers, you're supposed to be at ease. Because you don't have to apologize to them for them to forgive you. They're already part of the relationship that you are forgiven, even though you have to ask them to forgive you. These types of things goes both ways like this. Or say yourself, it's all ourselves. Myself, yourself, you should always forgive. We're not talking about your enemies, we're talking about your brothers, the special brotherhood, that you have to be always ready to forgive. And they, on the other side, they should also seek forgiveness, but it's not like, it's a difficult thing, or they don't forgive, or things like this. It's a very easy method, but it's a very difficult method that requires lots of effort, and especially if things are done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And that's why the believers, they make this dua, because it's really by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are weak and we need the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one of which is to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove these evil things that is present in the hearts. And when you see people that have the same aqidah, the same belief, they pray together, they face the same qibla, and they do all kinds of things, and they're not different sects or anything, but then you would find the hearts might be against one another from the smallest things, when we have been forbidden to even take the means that would attain these types of things. And that's why the ulama also talk about salamatul sadr, or to have a sound heart towards everyone. And this is one of the ways to purify oneself, as the ayah says. This is one of the ways to purify the heart, is to make such a beautiful dua. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. Our Lord, you are Ra'uf, and the Ra'uf is the most compassionate, the most merciful. And Ar-Ra'fa is the highest level of mercy, or Araq al-Rahma, the most soft part of the mercy. Mercy in itself is such a beautiful thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. But Ar-Ra'uf, that means it has to do something also with the mercy, that whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have this ra'fa towards him and the mercy, he would remove this ghill from his heart. So it shows the importance of the dua with the names and attributes of Allah. This ghill, or this grudges, or the hatred that can be in the heart, is from the evil within our own selves. So when you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using the two names of Allah, Ar-Ra'uf, Ar-Rahim, that means if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would accept your dua and remove this from your heart, this is the effect of the mercy of Allah. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His ra'fa, and His compassionate towards you, and the mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make you save your heart from such an evil thing that nobody will enter Jannah till this is removed. Either they remove it in this life, or if they die with it, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, they won't enter Jannah till it's removed. As also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the believers in Jannah, He says about them, وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي صُدُورِهِمْ مِنْ غِلٍّ إِخْوَانًا عَلَى سُرُرٍ مُتَقَابِلِينَ. Talking about them in Jannah. وَنَزَعْنَا, we took away from their hearts the ghil, the same word, this grudges, this unease. إِخْوَانًا, brothers, عَلَى سُرُرٍ مُتَقَابِلِينَ, on recliners, facing one another, meaning in Jannah. And it was said in the tafsir that this is the ghil which is not sinful. It's just something that a person is not able to push that away from himself, but it did not come into one's speech or one's actions, and he would act perfectly towards their brothers. So this will be removed from their hearts. Because of the time, but one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ also with the ghil, he said ﷺ, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and it's an authentic hadith, ثلاث لا يغل عليهن قلب مسلم. Three things that the heart of the Muslim should not be having these grudges or these unease with regards to three things. You should be at ease with these three things, and not to have ghil in the heart with these three matters. That means whoever attained these three matters, his ghil will be removed from his heart. Removed from his heart. So first of all, is it the truthfulness and the sincerity is there? It has to be there. You want to remove the ghil from your heart. You want to have the purest heart towards others. How to do that? Follow what the Prophet ﷺ said and remove the ghil in these three matters. The first one, he said, إخلاص العمل لله. Make the amal, the action, sincerely for the sake of Allah. So al-ikhlas. The deeds are only for the sake of Allah, whether it's a personal action or dealing with others. And as we said, we heard in the hadith yesterday of the Prophet ﷺ, طوبى لعبد, praising the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he is آخذ بعنان فرسه, he is doing things only for the sake of Allah, to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. إن كان في الساقة ففي الساقة, وإن كان في الحراسة ففي الحراسة. If they put him in the back of the army, he's back in the army. He's in the back. If they put him in security, they put him in, he's in security. It doesn't matter where his position is. He does not long for anything except to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. So, ikhlasul amal lillah, with all actions to be sincerely for the sake of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us about this. And He will ask us about if the effect of one's da'wah or one's action, doing things for the sake of Allah of matters of deen, and it's not successful because of these evil things, we will be asked about it. This ummah has the responsibility to carry the truth and to convey the truth. So if this is a position that a person wants to be, there's a price to be paid as a result of this. That means the person has to purify himself for the sake of Allah, for the truth to be spread. You have to have that sincerity for the sake of Allah. Otherwise, وَلَا تَنَزَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ وَاصْبِرُوا. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not be in disputes, otherwise you will fail and your strength will go away. And this is at all times if people are doing things together. Once there is niza' and disputes, then all of their strength is ruined and they cannot do anything whatsoever as a result of that. So to remove this niza' is to have, or this disputes, is to have things sincerely for the sake of Allah. The second one, وَمُنَاصَحَةُ وَأَئِمَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. وَمُنَاصَحَةُ, making the nasiha to the a'imma of the Muslimin, to the leaders of the Muslimin. And the ulama, they say, the major leaders and the specific leaders. Major leaders, the rulers, to have good concern towards them. To make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them, that Allah guide them. That Allah make them do what is right. And things, and to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them from the evil within their own selves. And from those who are evil, close to them, and things like this. And if you have the means to go to them and advise them, mashallah, this is something that you should do. If you have the means to do that. Not to have hatred towards them, in which that you want to remove them and cause bloodshed and cause evil among the ummah. And the ghil, and it's deen, right? And when it comes to the deen, and with all types of weird interpretation that people might have, we have the interpretation of the early generations of Islam. But if it's a deen, that means if a person has this ghil towards the leaders in general, ghil, the personal grudges, with personal dunya matters, of course, not because of the sake of Allah, that means he would have ghil towards others. So one of the ways is to make it sincerely for the sake of Allah. You only want what is best for the religion, not for anything else. And the specific leaders, whether it's people working together in matters of da'wah, those who are in charge, imam of a masjid, the father in the household, the whatever, any type of a leadership, is to have the nasiha towards them, that you want what is best for them, you advise them. And this is one of the things that also that is lacking. Say, for example, that you are in a masjid or so, say, the imam of the masjid or the one that is in charge or whatever, he did something wrong or something that you don't like or whatever, don't keep it to yourself. Go to him, take him aside, and give him advice, right, with all sincerity in the heart. First of all, if you keep it inside, this ghil is not good. And try this, you would find the ease afterwards. If you would do this, you would find ease, and plus, he would benefit. He needs people to advise him. And if he is someone, truly a person of knowledge, he would love this. Not that he would take it as an attack and war between people and things like this. And as long as there's ikhlas and sincerity, without munasaha, people are going to ruin themselves. They have to correct one another. If you were listening last night with what Imam al-Ajuri rahimahullah, he was talking about the evil within our own selves. It is amazing how much evil we have in ourselves. This is your imam and yourself and your sheikh, and everybody has this. This is, as he says, this is things, istawtanatha nafs. The nafs have it built in. But some people worked on themselves and some people didn't work on themselves. So the nafs is that it loves, has this attachment to the dunya, so it has to work against oneself. We have the greed, we have to work against our own selves, and things like this. So to make munasaha, because we are bound to make mistakes, it goes both ways. It's not just make nasiha, also be prepared to accept the nasiha. And to be happy with the nasiha more than you're happy to give nasiha. Because your happiness for receiving a nasiha, it benefits you first. So that means you're much more happier than to give someone nasiha. This is the level of purifying oneself. And there's difference between nasiha and exposing someone. That's a different situation. We're not talking about someone being exposed or someone being treated with bad manners. No, even though this is a person should also receive it to benefit from it, but we should not help the shaitan over one another, and that's why there are etiquettes of the nasiha and how to do it and how the heart should be upon and how to physically and with speech and actions to do it. But this is brief. وَنَصَحَةَ أئمة المسلمين وَلُزُومِ جَمَاعَتِهِمْ, and to be with the jama'ah of the Muslimin. Also in the general sense and in the specific sense. Not to go against the Muslimin, not to go against and to detach oneself from the jama'ah, unless there is sinful acts or something that a person would fall into disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if there is munasaha and there is ikhlas and there is this, not to detach oneself from the jama'ah of the Muslimin in the general sense, those who would revolt against them and shed blood, and also in the very specific meaning of it. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, فَإِنَّ الدَّعْوَةَ تُحِيطُ مِنْ وَرَائِهِمْ, because the da'wah is encompassing them from behind them. So if a person leaves them, he loses this mercy of the da'wah and the dua being accepted. The more the people are in the jama'ah, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, al-jama'ah rahmah wal-furqatu adhab. Al-jama'ah, the jama'ah is rahmah. The mercy is in the jama'ah. People are together upon the haqq. And al-furqa, disputes and splitting, is punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But always, again, it's not the unity for the sake of unity, but to be for the sake of Allah, to be upon the truth, and not to be united on falsehood or bid'ah or innovations in the deen. So as the ulama, they say these three types of things, this is how the hearts are rectified. And whoever holds fast to it, his heart will be purified from any evil towards anyone, and also when it comes to matters of the deen. And many things, of course, and dua. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the evil within our own selves, and to forgive us and to forgive those who surpassed us in al-iman, and not to make any ghil in our hearts towards anyone. وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه وسلم.